In 1988, a man spent 5 years in prison for a rape he didn't commit. The victim was completely certain he was the one. She wasn't lying. Her memory was. Here's what most people assume about memory. You assume it works like a recording. Something happens, your brain captures it, and it sits there in storage, untouched, waiting for you to press play whenever you need it again. Maybe it fades a little at the edges over time, the way an old tape gets grainy. But the core of it, you assume, stays intact. The event happened, your brain filmed it, and what you remember is what actually occurred. That assumption is almost completely wrong, and the person who proved it spent her entire career doing something that sounds almost cruel. She planted memories inside people's heads on purpose. Her name is Elizabeth Loftus, and in the 1970s she started asking a simple question. If you show two people the exact same event and then ask them about it using slightly different words, will they remember it differently? She ran an experiment where people watched a video of a car accident. Afterwards, she asked one group how fast the cars were going when they smashed into each other. She asked another group the same question, but used the word contacted instead. Same video. One word changed. The smashed group estimated significantly higher speeds. And when she asked them a week later if they'd seen broken glass in the video, the smashed group was far more likely to say yes. There was no broken glass. It was never in the video. Their brains had added it in, quietly, to match the version of the story a single word had suggested to them. That was just the beginning. In the 1990s, Loftus ran something bigger, an experiment now known as the Lost in the Mall study. Researchers approached people and told them a detailed story about something that supposedly happened to them as a child, getting lost in a shopping mall, crying, being frightened, and eventually being rescued by an elderly stranger and reunited with their family. The story was completely fabricated. It never happened to any of them. But roughly 1 in 4 participants didn't just believe it. They elaborated on it. They added their own details. What the mall looked like. What the stranger was wearing. How relieved they felt when they saw their parents again. These weren't lies. The participants weren't performing for the researchers. They had, at some level, actually come to remember an afternoon that never existed. Since then, researchers have planted far stranger memories. People have been convinced they once met Bugs Bunny at Disneyland, a physically impossible event since Bugs Bunny isn't a Disney character. People have been convinced they were nearly abducted by a stranger as a child, that they once witnessed a demonic possession, that they got seriously ill from eating a specific food, all events that never occurred. Some of these fabricated memories became so vivid that when researchers later told participants the truth, that none of it had happened, the participants pushed back. They insisted the memory was real. They could describe the lighting, the smell, the exact sequence of events. The fake memory didn't feel any different from a real one, because inside the brain, it wasn't built any differently. Here's the mechanism underneath all of this, and it's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Memory is not playback, it's reconstruction. Every time you remember something, your brain isn't retrieving a saved file. It's rebuilding the event from fragments, and every time it rebuilds it, it uses whatever information is available in that moment, including information that has nothing to do with what actually happened. A leading question, a photograph you saw later, a story someone else told about the same day, a word like smashed instead of contacted. All of it gets folded into the reconstruction, seamlessly, with no internal warning label telling you which part is real and which part got added afterward. This is why eyewitness testimony, for most of legal history treated as close to unimpeachable, turns out to be one of the least reliable forms of evidence available. The man in that 1988 case wasn't convicted because the victim lied. He was convicted because her brain had reconstructed the traumatic memory using whatever details were available at the time, including, as it turned out, details that pointed at the wrong person entirely. DNA evidence eventually proved his innocence. He served years for a memory that felt completely, sincerely real to the person who held it. And this doesn't just apply to courtrooms and lab experiments. It applies to the argument you had last week that your positive went one way, while the other person is just as positive it went differently. It applies to the childhood memory you'd swear happened exactly as you picture it, the one that might actually be a photograph you saw, or a story retold so many times at family dinners that you built a memory out of the retelling instead of the event. Your brain cannot tell the difference between something it recorded and something it reconstructed convincingly. Confidence and accuracy, it turns out, are almost entirely unrelated. The most certain people in Loftus's studies were often the ones remembering things that never happened. So, why does the brain work this way? Why didn't evolution give us something closer to an actual recording? The likely answer is that accurate playback was never really the goal. Memory evolved to help you make fast decisions using the general shape of your past, not to preserve courtroom-grade footage of every afternoon. A brain that reconstructs quickly using whatever's available in the moment is more useful for survival than a brain that stores perfect, unchangeable records but takes longer to access them. You didn't get a flawed recording device. You got a fast, flexible storytelling machine, one that's very good at giving you a usable version of the past and very bad at telling you when it's improvising. Think about what this means the next time you feel completely certain about something you remember. Not that you're lying, not that you're broken. Just that certainty was never proof, it never was. The feeling of remembering clearly and the reality of what happened are two separate things that only sometimes overlap, and your brain has no reliable way of telling you when they don't. Somewhere, right now, someone is telling a story about their own life with complete sincerity, describing a moment in vivid, specific detail. And some of what they're describing may have never happened at all. They are not lying to you. Their brain simply finished the story for them, the way it finishes every story, and handed it back as if it had been there all along.